Veda Bhumi, the land of knowledge. This has been one of the names of Bharat, and rightfully so. Bharat has an ocean full of knowledge. Right from Vedas, Puranas, Smriti, Upanishads, Agamas, Siddhantas, the volume of knowledge that we have in Bharat is wide, deep and complex. Pancha Siddhantika, treatise on astronomy, Patanjali Yoga Shastra, principles of yoga, Charaka Samhita, principles on Ayurveda, Sushruta Samhita, principles on surgery and medicine, Rasendra Mangalam, science of alchemy, Vaiseshika Darshanam, principles of atomic theory, Aryabhattiyam, principles of astronomy. Like this, the list goes on and on and on. And in Project Shivoham, we made detailed documentaries on many of these ancient sciences, philosophies, and many other scriptures. And this documentary is about a very ancient scripture that will fundamentally change your perspective and perception about the Puranas. Let's get started. I know what you might be thinking about the map of Bharat shown here. We'll talk about it towards the end of this doc film. And it is not about what you might be thinking. Sri Vedavyasa Maharshi authored 18 Mahapuranas. And of the 18 Mahapuranas, Shiva Mahapuranam. This is the topic of interest for us today. Shiva Puranam is one of the largest Mahapurana, and internally it has Vidyeshwara Samhita, Rudra Samhita, Shatarudra Samhita, Koti Rudra Samhita, Uma Samhita, Vayavya Samhita. 6 books as we know today together make Shiva Mahapuranam. But there are many other books which are possibly lost, and we don't have the full Shiva Puranam as it was many centuries ago. In Shiva Mahapuranam, of all the 6 books, Uma Samhita, written in the name of Ma Parvati. This is where, in Uma Samhita, the ancient human anatomy is detailed out at an astonishing level of granularity. Right from the metabolism in human beings, up until how the fetus gets developed month by month, and a lot more details about human anatomy are detailed in Uma Samhita. And in this doc film, let's try to understand these astonishing details about human anatomy as described in Shiva Mahapuranam by Vedavyasa Maharshi. There is quite a deep background and context about Uma Samhita in Shiva Puranam, but owing to the subject and the objective of this doc film, let's directly cut across to the point of our interest. It all starts with a conversation between Brahma Manasa Putra Sanat Kumara and Maharshi Sri Vedavyasa. Vidhim tat vadedanim jiva janma vidhanataha garbhe stitam cha tasyapi vairagyardham muniswara. These are the words of Vedavyasa Maharshi towards Sanat Kumara. O Muniswara, to realize the materialistic and worldly detachment, please narrate to me how human beings grow in the womb and the process of their birth. Thus, Sanat Kumara starts narrating to Vedavyasa Maharshi about the human anatomy. For ease of understanding all the details narrated by Sanat Kumara, I cut it into 3 different chapters. In chapter 1, let's try and understand how metabolism in human beings is explained. And in chapter number 2, it's all about pregnancy and fetus development. And in chapter number 3, the psychology of the fetus when it was in the mother's womb. So these are the 3 important parts of the entire conversation that essentially explains about human anatomy as described in Shiva Mahapuranam. 2 quick things before we move forward. Number 1, the chapters might appear disconnected, but it is not. You'll get to know the flow once we get through the chapters. They're very much connected and relevant to each other. And point number 2, the details about human anatomy in Shiva Puranam are really extensive. I just cherry-picked few slokas to give you an essence of, or rather the broad sense of, how human anatomy is described in this ancient scripture. So with that, let's get started. So let's get to the first chapter, the metabolism in human beings. Karnakshi nasika jihva danta shishnau gudam nakah malakshayah kapah svedo vindmutram dvadasha smruta. The translation is the ears, eyes, nose, tongue, teeth, genital, anus, nails are the receptacles of mala, which is the excrete in a human body. Sweat, phlegm, feces, and urine together are the 12 places in the body where excretion happens. Rasastu dehe sarati sapushastena jayate. And this excretion is a result of the flow of rasa all over the body. Rasa here refers to the flow of vital energy all over the body. And excretion in these 12 places is a result of it. That's what it means. Malaur dvadashabhi. Rasastu dehe sarati sapushtasthena jayate. And this excretion is a result of the flow of rasa all over the body. Rasa here refers to the flow of vital energy all over the body. And excretion in these 12 places is a result of it. That's what it means. Malaur dvadashabhi. हृत्पद्मे प्रतिबंधाश्च सर्वनाड्यः समं ततः ज्ञेया रसप्रवाहिन्यस्तत्प्रकारं ब्रुवे मुने. A minute ago, when we were discussing about the metabolism in human body, it was mentioned that the flow of rasa is the cause and the excretion is its effect. And in this sloka, the rasa is further elaborated. Rasa means the vital energy in human body, and the channels through which the rasa flows all over the human body is called as nadi. And this nadi is not equal to nerves, as it's commonly mistaken. Rather, nadi is a channel for the flow of the vital energy rasa. And the classification of nadi is more transversal in nature. It essentially cuts through the nervous system, muscular system, and the skeletal system in a human body. It's more of an Ayurvedic way of looking at human body. It is not mentioned here in this slokam, but in Ayurvedam, the entire human body has 72,000 nadis spread all over, carrying out vital energy flow to each and every part of the body. And here in this slokam, Hrutpadme pratibandhascha sarva nadya samam tataha. It means all the nadis present in human body are centrally connected and orchestrated from hridayam, which is heart. And from the heart, rasapravahinyastat prakaram. The flow of rasa through the nadis all over the body are centrally orchestrated from the heart of a human being. Now let's connect to the previous one and read it together. The flow of rasa is centrally orchestrated from the heart of a human body through the channels which are called as nadis, and as a result of this flow of rasa, excretion, which is mala, happens in 12 places in human body. So you're getting it right? We're building on it. So rasa is the vital flow of energy throughout the body, orchestrated from the heart, and as a result of it, the excretion happens. But what causes rasa? Here it is. तासां मुखेषु तं सूक्ष्मं प्राणास्थापयेत् रसं रसेन तेन नाडीस्ताः प्राणं पूरयते पुनः. The translation is Pranavayu, which is the inhaled air, fills the minute entry points of each nadi by aiding the flow of rasa all over the body. Thus, prana is sustained. So basically here the respiration is being explained. Prana sthapayet rasam. Prana, which is the inhaled air, supports or augments the flow of rasa, which is the vital source of energy. What's important to observe here is prana, or the inhaled air, is supporting the flow of rasa, and it is essential to establish the flow of rasa. But it is not the cause for existence of rasa. But pranavayu is a very essential element in the flow of rasa throughout the nadis all over the body. That's what it means. Punah prayamti sampurnastascha deham samam tataha tatassa nadi madhyastas sarirenatmana rasa pachyate pachyamanascha bhavet pakadvayam punah tvaktaya veshtayate purvam rudhiram cha prajayate. The rasa, which is the vital source of life, is created due to two modes of digestion in a human body. Digestion of the food that we take. This digestion process happens in two different modes. And this very process is also the source for formation of skin and blood in human beings. That is the essence of these two slokas. So let's connect it backwards. The food that we take gets digested and it causes rasa, and the flow of rasa is augmented by the flow of pranavayu to all the nadis, which are centrally connected at the heart. And as a result of the flow of the vital energy rasa, mala is generated. Now that's the sequential process of human metabolism being explained in Shiva Puranam. So like this, the metabolism is further detailed out in Shiva Puranam. But to cut it short and move forward, it further elaborates on the formation of the tissues in our body. Raktal lomani mamsamcha kesha snayuscha mamsataha snayutascha tadhasthini nakha majjasti sambhavaha. After explaining the metabolism, its effects and all, here we get to the point where how the body tissues are formed. And this is one of the slokas which explains just that. The hair of the body and flesh are produced from the blood. The hair on the head and the sinews are produced from the flesh. From the sinews, the bones are produced. The nails and bone marrow are produced from the bones. And this creation of body tissues is effect, while the metabolic processes remain the cause. Like this, Shiva Puranam goes on detailing about how different parts of the body are formed, the tissues, its functions, and lot more. So moving next on to the most important point, Shukram hi prasavatmakam. While explaining the formation of different tissues and all, there is a point where it starts explaining about the semen. Shukram hi prasavatmakam. The semen is the source for the genesis of progeny of a human being. So now let us see how the life begins. And that brings us to the second chapter, and here is what Sanat Kumara narrated to Vedavyasa Maharshi about pregnancy and fetus development in human beings. Shukro najjayate shukrada divya dehasya sambhavah rutukale yada shukram nirdesham yoni samsthitam tadvayu samsprushtam stri rakte naikatam vrajet visargakale shukrasya jivah karana samyutah. These slokas explain the biological union of a man and woman, the intercourse that leads to conception. It says that during the prescribed period, post-monthly menstruation in a woman, and with the biological union of man and woman, semen enters through the vaginal passage and mingles with the blood of the woman, which results in the formation of Jiva. And Jiva is life. From here onwards, it gets much more interesting. Sanat Kumara explains Vedavyasa Maharshi how the fetus in the mother's womb gets developed month after month. Pancharatrena kalilam budbuda akaratam vrajet budbuda saptaratrena mamsapeshi bhavet punaha. And the translation is, from the point of the intercourse of the man and woman, after 5 nights have passed, in the 5th night, the fetus assumes the shape of a bubble, and in the 7th night, the fetus becomes a muscular mass. Dvimasabhyantarenaiva kramashas sambhavediha tribhirmasaih prajayamte sarvehyam kuru samdhayaha. In the 2nd month, neck, head, shoulders, backbone, belly, hands, feet, waist and lips are formed. And in the 3rd month, all the joints in the body are formed. Masais chaturbhirangulyaha prajayamte yadhakramam mukham nasacha karnau masai panchabhirevacha. In the 4th month, fingers and palms are formed, and in the 5th month, mouth, nose, ears are formed. Danta panktis tadha guhyam jayamte cha nakah punaha karnayostu bhavet chidram shanmasabhyamtarena tu. By the 6th month of the pregnancy, rows of teeth, the private parts, and nails, and the orifice of the ears takes shape. Payurmehamupastham cha nabhischabhyupajayate sandhyo ye cha gatreshu masairjayamti saptabhi. By the 7th month of pregnancy, the rectum, the genitals as per the gender, and the navel are formed. By the 7th month, the fetus is fully developed. Now, it's very much possible that based on our current understanding of fetus development and pregnancy and the biology around it, there could be discrepancies or deviations from what is mentioned in Shiva Puranam. Totally possible. But let's understand one thing. This ancient scripture, which was written some thousands of years ago, articulates the fetus development and the pregnancy and the anatomy of human body so well, which is 100% scientific and historic. It is the deep antiquity that leaves all of us in a sense of astonishment as to how such level of detail was possible. Of course, you cannot reconcile in a very hard logical manner because this is a conversation between Brahma Manasaputra Sanat Kumara and Vedavyasa Maharshi. And it is very much mystical, metaphysical, spiritual, and scientific as well. So let's leave it there. And here are some more interesting details about the fetus. This one is rather more about the construct of the womb. Anga pratyanga sampurnaha paripakvasya tishtati udare maturachanno jarayo munisattama. Thus, fully developed fetus stays in the mother's womb covered by the embryonic skin. Here, the placenta is being talked about. Udare maturachanno, the skin inside the womb of the mother, the embryonic skin in which the baby is held. Maturahara chaurnyena shadvidhena rasena tu nabhinala nibandhena vardhate sa dine dine. The child develops day by day by steadily taking in the food of the mother of all 6 days through the umbilical cord. 2 interesting things in this slokam. The first one, Maturahara chaurnyena shadvidhena rasena tu. The baby in the mother's womb could taste all the tastes what the mother eats, the 6 varieties of taste. And all this happens through Nabhi Nala Nibandhena. Nabhi means navel, Nala means channel, Bandhana means to tie. Nabhi Nala Nibandhena is the umbilical cord which ties the mother and the baby together. And through the umbilical cord, the baby tastes all the food taken by the mother and the baby gets developed day by day. Like this, there are a lot more details about the anatomy of the newborn baby. Like here are a couple of shlokas for your reference. The bones are 360 in number for a newborn. There are 500 muscles and there are 35 million hair follicles. Same way, the solid fat in a newborn is 2.5 tulas and the blood is 3 palas. All these are different units of measure, which might be difficult for us to understand unless one is really in depth into the scriptures to understand what these units of measure are. But bottom line is, the anatomy of the newborn baby is also very well defined in Shiva Puranam. And that brings us to the last chapter of this doc film, the psychological state of the fetus when it was in the mother's womb. And in fact, this chapter is the core purpose of why Sanat Kumara is explaining to Vedavyasa Maharshi about the fetus development and the human anatomy. लोहकुंभे यथा न्यस्तः पच्यते कश्चिदाग्निना गर्भकुंभे तथा क्षिप्तः पच्यते जठराग्निना. Imagine how it would be to drop a living person into a melting pot of iron. Imagine the torture that the person undergoes. That's exactly how the fetus feels in its mother's womb. That's because of the Jataragni, which is the gastric fire, the acidic secretions in the stomach of the mother when she feels hungry. In that gastric fire, the fetus or the baby feels very tormented. Mrutaschaham punarjato jataschaham punarmrutah nana yoni sahasrani maya drishtani jayata. The thoughts of the fetus flows like this. It speaks to itself. I am dead and born many times, and in all these births I have seen many types of wombs. Feeling trapped in the mother's womb, undergoing extreme torture, the fetus starts to introspect itself. It speaks to itself that I am born and dead many times, and in all these births and deaths, I've seen many mothers in my previous lives. Basically here the Punarjanma Siddhantam or the Karma Siddhantam, the reincarnation, which is essentially an important and central part of Sanatana Dharma, that is being talked about. And according to Shiva Puranam, the fetus can think, introspect and speak to itself. And the fetus says to itself, Adhuna jata matroham prapta samskara yevacha shreyo muna karishyami yena garbhena sambhavaha. And the fetus speaks to itself like this. This time when my mother gives me birth and confers me with samskaram. Samskaram means education, nourishment, refinement. So when my mother gives me the samskaram, I shall strive to live a life that does not have a rebirth again. Yena garbhena sambhavaha. Garbhastas chimtayatmevamaham garbhad vinismrutah anveshayami shivajnanam samsara vinivartakam. The fetus says to itself that as soon as I am released from this womb, I will lose my current memory, but I will set on a quest to acquire Shivajnanam, which is to understand Shiva, which is the ultimate and real knowledge and the only means by which I can escape the eternal cycle of birth and death. Anveshyami Shivajnanam samsara vinivartakam. And finally, Sanat Kumara concludes saying, Iti deha griham hyeta nitya satya nityatmanaha avisuddham visuddhasya karma bandha vinirmitam. O Vedavyasa, such is the transient abode, the body of the eternal soul. The body is impure, but the soul is eternally pure. The body and its birth is generated due to the past actions of that soul, resulting in the bondage of the pure soul in the impure body. The essence of Sanatana Dharma is every action of yours will have an inalienable consequence attached to it. All of us are individually responsible for our actions and its consequences. The soul is eternal, but the body is transient. That is why the body is referred as karma bandha vinirmitam. The body is the result of the actions that the soul has performed in his or her previous lifetimes. That inherently means that what you do today will define your tomorrow. And that's where Brahma Manasaputra Sanat Kumara concludes Dehotpatti Varnanam, part of Uma Samhita, eventually part of Shiva Puranam, explaining about the anatomy of human body and its ultimate purpose and a lot more. Now let's zoom out and look at it for one last time. The ancient human anatomy as described in Shiva Puranam by Vedavyasa Maharshi. This is how it looks like. Starting with the very basic, a bottom-up approach. Dvadasamala, the excretions in human body. That's number one. Number two, going one level above. Nadi Vyavastha, the muscular and nervous system. Number three, flows of prana and rasa, respiration and vital flow of energy. Number four, Sharira Dhatus, formation of body tissues. So 1, 2, 3, 4 essentially explains about the human anatomy, the metabolism, and a lot more. And then comes number 5, Garbhadharana, the genesis of life. Number 6, Garbha Pravruddhi, growth and development of fetus month on month. And number 7, Garbhastha Narakam, the psychology of the fetus and the torture that the fetus undergoes, and how the fetus remembers its past lives and speaks to itself that it don't want to be born again. And this one should be the last time that I should be born. That's what the fetus thinks. And finally, in the level 8, the fetus says to itself that attainment of Shiva Jnanam is the only way out of this eternal cycle of birth and death, and that's how a person seeks to understand Shiva right after his or her birth. My main objective in making a doc film on this subject is not to preach the spiritual aspects of Shiva Puranam or to try to bring forward the scientific aspects of Shiva Puranam. It's none of these two. It is just about introspecting our perception about the Puranas as mythology. See, the word mythology originates from the Greek word mythos, which is eventually cognate to Sanskritam word mithya, means illusion. Calling Puranas as mythology or illusion outright shows our ignorance. We just saw how the spiritual and the scientific aspects are well intertwined and presented in Shiva Puranam in a dialectical and a simple manner. Our current understanding about the anatomy of human body is something that got developed last 500 years. We'll see about that in a minute. But the point here is Shiva Puranam has the history of almost thousands of years. It was written more or less during the period of Mahabharata. There could be certain discrepancies or deviations, but broadly if you see the essence of it, it is very much correct scientifically. The anatomy, the biology of the pregnancy, and all these things. What our science might not understand today yet is, can the fetus think? What would be the brain activity of a fetus? In Shiva Puranam, it says that the fetus can think and introspect and talk to itself. Maybe 100 years down the line, we might discover that yes, fetus also has a brain activity running through it. But the point is, outright calling Puranas as mythology will just reflect our ignorance. Having said that, there is no need for blindly believing in a book. That's not a culture of Bharat. You know what I mean. So use your common sense. And if you are interested in the subject, do your own reading and research and then get to your conclusions. Interestingly, Shiva Puranam is not the only scripture talking about the fetus development and the pregnancy and the biology around it. There is also another Upanishad called Garbha Upanishad ascribing to Atharvana Vedam written by Maharshi Pippalada. Even Garbha Upanishad explains in very detailed manner about how the fetus gets developed month after month. In fact, week after week. I've already made a documentary on this subject and you can watch it should you be interested. I'll try to leave the link in the description below. Let's also quickly flip through the history of the anatomy as we know today. Leonardo da Vinci needs no introduction. He sketched how the anatomy of a human body would look like by examining on dead bodies or living persons. In fact, the sketch that you're seeing here on the screen is the one which he sketched about the fetus in a human womb. And this happened approximately 550 years ago somewhere in Italy. Now just imagine, the fact of the matter is, during the same time while Leonardo da Vinci was trying to sketch how the fetus would look like based on his observations and experiments, in Bharat, Shiva Puranam existed with all sorts of minute details about the human anatomy and the pregnancy and the fetus development and a lot more. Absolutely no disrespect or discrediting Leonardo da Vinci for his great achievements. I'm a big fan of him. But strictly speaking, somewhere the wheel was getting reinvented. And Shiva is a spiritual scripture, I would say. If you really get to the mainstream scientific scriptures like Sushruta Samhita or Charaka Samhita, things are far more detailed, exclusively in scientific manner. And this is the knowledge of Bharat which once thrived but now lost, awaiting to be found again. The greatest milestone in modern day anatomy, our understanding of the human body, the greatest thing that ever happened was because of Andreas Vesalius, a Belgian scientist just few decades after Leonardo da Vinci. He picked up the work of Leonardo da Vinci, and Andreas wrote a book, De Corpus Humani, where it explains about the minutest possible details of those times of the human anatomy. He researched on the dead bodies, understood the anatomy behind, and then he wrote this book, De Corporis Humani, thus laying foundation to the field of anatomy in the life sciences. This map of the erstwhile Akhand Bharat, the moment I flashed this, two diametrically opposite mindsets would have kicked in. One is a hyper left bias, saying that okay, it's all Sanghi rhetoric and all. And there is a hyper right bias that we know it all. Let's quickly try to understand these two extreme biased mindsets, just to protect ourselves, not fall into the trap of either of these two extremes. The hyper left bias is a mindset which blinds people to know the truth, and it blinds with religious, political or ideological filters. These people can accept Leonardo da Vinci's contributions on anatomy, but they have absolutely objections with Vedavyasa Maharshi's SHIVOHAM. Just try to imagine introducing a chapter in school history textbook about SHIVOHAM and the anatomy and the biological details mentioned in it. These folks get rattled, shouting out freedom of religion, saffronization, Sanghi and all this kinds of nonsensical stuff. That is hyper left. And then comes the hyper right. It's all about we know it all. We already knew this thousands of years ago. Yes, we know that thousands of years ago, but that has to be correct and factual. What I mean by that is, for example, the distance to sun given in Hanuman Chalisa. This is absolutely a hoax. You just open the Gita Press translation of Hanuman Chalisa and you'll get to know. Despite Gita Press translation, which is a highly reliable source about Hanuman Chalisa, clearly saying that it is not the distance between earth and sun that is mentioned, rather it is just an arbitrary representation of the distance between sun and earth. People believe the WhatsApp forwards because that gives a jingoistic pleasure. In this case as well, people have the mindset which blinds them with egoistic, self-righteousness and jingoism. And this mindset is also equally dangerous. Both these extremes, they have one thing in common. They subvert the truth, knowingly or unknowingly. So just be careful. If you're really interested to understand the real heritage of Bharat and its contributions in different fields of science, maths, spirituality, philosophy, etc., don't fall into the trap of these two extreme mindsets. Use your common sense, stay balanced, and let's move forward. Vedahametam purusham mahantam adityavarnam tamasah parastad tameva viditvati mrutyumeti nanyah pandha vidyate ayanaya. That is the bottom line. And as always, thanks for watching.